We were talking earlier in the show about how in the western corn belt, we don't have a lot of tile in the ground. So now that we're putting tile in the ground, we want to do it the right way. There are several things that we can learn from people who put tile in for 50, 80, 100 years. We just want to try to do this thing right so we don't have to redo it in the future.
Well, okay, Brian, that said, let's look at, there's really three different ways, in my opinion, that guys are doing tiling. One would just be fixing problem areas. Maybe just have a little bit of tile over here, a little bit of tile over there, maybe this low spot over here, something like that. The other way is pattern tiling. If we're doing the whole field, we're doing every, let's just say, 40-foot spacings or something across the whole field. That's another way of tiling. And then the third way is doing sub-irrigation with the tile. And you may say, all right, I want to put some tile out in the field, but I want to leave myself open where in the future, if I want to do sub-irrigation through that tile, I can do that too. There are three completely different ways to tile, and it's going to totally change how you design the tile in that field. And you may be thinking, as we've thought on our farm, man, isn't there just one right way to tile that field? No, there's actually a lot of different ways you can do it and still get the same outcome.
But the whole thing is we want to look at mistakes that have been made in the past. And the number one mistake that people have made with tile in the past, and no offense if you've got some of these on your farm, but putting tile inlets in your field is not the right way to go. Because we talk to non-farmers all the time, and this is a big deal in the non-farm community. They want to shut us down for tiling and drainage in fields. But you know what? If we do tile the right way, they have absolutely no data to back that up. So here's what I'm talking about. When we tile the right way, we reduce erosion, we reduce flooding, we improve downstream water quality. All those things are great. But when you put a tile inlet out there, then what happens when you get a big rain? Well, the water goes right into that tile line. Okay, so now you've just increased flooding. Another thing that goes right in there is soil. So now you've just increased erosion. Another thing that goes in there is chemical, also fertilizer. When those go in there, you're making that downstream water quality worse. So all the negative things that people talk about with tile, they're all true if you have an inlet out in your field. If you don't do that, if you just keep your tile line deep, at least 2-3 feet deep in the ground, you have soil to filter out that water. You're not going to have the flooding, you're not going to have the erosion, you're not going to have the contaminants getting downstream. So at all costs, we want you to avoid putting inlets in your field at all. All right, let's talk about next about this relatively new topic of using tile lines as sub-irrigation. Now this is something that Darren and I don't have the personal experience with yet, but we're planning to put at least one, if not two systems in on our farm, potentially even this fall, just to see what we think of that, because it does seem like it's got some merit. The biggest downside is you're going to have to put a bunch more tile in your field. Instead of going 50-foot spacings, you might be at 20-foot spacings. And then the other thing is you're going to have a well to feed that, and you're going to have shutoffs at the end. So it's going to obviously require more management. But compared to an irrigation system that would be, let's say, center pivot, you know, it's probably not any more work to go this way as to have that center pivot system.
Well, there's certainly some advantages to doing irrigation through tile lines. From the guys that have done it already that we've talked to, they claim that their water usage is down to about half of what they were doing with traditional center pivot type irrigation.
Obviously, because you're not going to have all that evaporation.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. The other thing is their drainage is fantastic in the fields. A lot of guys that have irrigation say they're having issues with salt buildup or other things. Well, if you can get water away when you have excess, that's a good thing. And salts will flush down through your soil and can leave your system as long as you have good drainage underneath. So that's a good thing. And the other side that is an advantage over center pivot irrigation is you can now irrigate those corners.
And yes, you'll invest quite a few dollars in order to do this, but just think about the benefits that you're going to get, because now you can solve the problem of too much water and solve the problem of too little water.
Okay, now the question, Brian, is do I need pattern tile or can I just tile in certain areas of the field?
Yeah, well, this is totally a judgment call, whatever you want to do on your farm, but all I can tell you is, especially if you've got soil problems, high salt, high pH, those types of things, you're going to need more tile, at least in those areas. We run into all these guys that have iron deficiency chlorosis. Well, let's look at the root cause of the problem. Yes, I know you can plant varieties that are better than others in the short term. There's some things you can do in the short term, like putting more iron out, for example. But in the long term, your fix is get more drainage in that field. If you improve your drainage, you'll lower your salts, you'll lower your pH, you'll lower your bicarbonates, you'll lower your nitrate in those areas. And all that means is you're going to have less incidence of iron deficiency chlorosis going forward.
Well, this year was certainly an example where good drainage paid off. On our farm, we were in the field a few days sooner than many people in our area because we had good drainage in a wet spring.
Yep, don't ever forget that all tile lines are doing is lowering the water table. They absolutely are not taking all the water out of your soil. Your soil can still be at maximum holding capacity for water. It's just by lowering the water table, now you've allowed oxygen to get in, meaning roots can grow down at least to the depth where your water table is at.
Well, the roots of our crop are very important, Brian, but the roots of our weed of the week are pretty troublesome. We'll explain coming up later in the show.